past few months, Wall Street banks have already slashed over 15,000 jobs.
The bull market for talent on Wall Street is over. The boom obviously has turned into a bust.
However, that wasn't the end of it.
Last week we reported 1,600 job cuts at Morgan Stanley.
Banks are preparing to lay off tens of thousands of workers across the next year.
I think for a lot of folks, this is a sign that there'll be potentially rolling cuts between now and through the first half of 23.
And it's becoming Wall Street's biggest layoff cycle since the financial crisis in 2008. Now, if you haven't seen my last video on Wall Street layoffs, I'll link it down in my description box below. But essentially, mass layoffs are looming after banks built up their workforces during the last 2 years as the banking industry saw a boom with M&A, IPOs, and SPACs flooding in during the pandemic. In 2020 and 2021, bankers were lavished with top pay. Just like the tech industry has spent lavishly on their workforce over the past couple of years and hired aggressively, the same has happened to Wall Street banks. In fact, for many investment bankers, payroll actually increased nearly 30%. Around 2020 and 2021, a lot of bankers were complaining about their work-life balance while working from home, and so a lot of banks responded by increasing the pay quite drastically. They were offered Peloton bikes, retention bonuses, salary increases, and the promise of hiring even more people to try and lessen their workload. At the same time, all of these pay increases and retention bonuses were being offered. Banks also halted their annual culling of bankers. Usually, investment banks will cull around 1 to 5% of their investment banking division every single year, but during the pandemic, this all stopped. However, since then, across the past year, M&A activity has really halted. The largest 5 United States investment banks saw their revenues plunge nearly 50%, largely due to a decline in both M&A and IPOs. The Federal Reserve Bank initiated interest rate hikes to combat record levels of runaway inflation. The business landscape substantially changed. Wall Street, along with the tech sector, needed to adjust. However, unlike the tech sector, which has already done so many layoffs, Wall Street is really just getting started. Goldman Sachs let go of 500 employees during the summer of 2022, which is really considered part of their annual regular culling cycle. However, more recently, Goldman Sachs did another round of layoffs. This time, it affected 3,200 employees, approximately 7% of their workforce worldwide. And amongst Wall Street, there tends to be a herd mentality. Once one bank starts to lay off employees, the other banks do the same. It makes it much easier for the CEO and C-suite to begin laying off people if their excuse is just that everyone else is doing the same thing. With the stock market continuing to fall lately, it's reasonable to assume that there will continue to be layoffs on Wall Street. So who's gotten cut so far? In December, Morgan Stanley cut 1,600 jobs, about 2% of its global workforce. Credit Suisse, which is in the midst of a restructuring, cut 2,700 employees at the end of 2022, and they aim to remove another 9,000 positions by 2025. That's 17% of their workforce. HSBC made cuts across its global workforce by letting go of at least 200 senior operations managers and many in the C-suite. Wells Fargo also laid off hundreds of people in its mortgage division. Deutsche Bank plans on separating dozens of staff from their payroll, and the move will impact the investment bank's origination and advisory teams, mostly affecting their junior bankers. Barclays is also laying off about 200 employees in its banking and trading units, and Citigroup already laid off 50 traders. BlackRock is also cutting around 500 employees, which is approximately 3% of their workforce, and it's the first round of their layoffs since 2019. So what about bonuses? How are they affected? Well, bonuses have long been a part of the attraction for Wall Street jobs. Getting a big bonus is usually an affirmation that you're doing a good job. Oftentimes around bonus season, which is also annual review season, bankers would be called into conference rooms, typically with frosted glass, and they would have a one-on-one conversation with someone who is more senior about their performance and what their bonus looks like for that year. A larger bonus is typically an indication that you're doing a good job, and a lower bonus signifies you're not and that you could be up for the chopping block. However, bonus pools in general will rise and fall with economic activity, meaning that even if you're a top performer in a bad year, you could take home a really low bonus just because the bonus pool is smaller. For example, while JP Morgan hasn't quite gone through any layoffs in their workforce, the bank has responded by slashing bonuses by 30% due to poor performance. Similarly, Bank of America and Citigroup are considering cutting bonuses by up to 30% and even in others by more than 45%. There's even the fear that really low performers are not going to get anything at all. Annual bonus numbers are probably one of the most anticipated things that bankers or anyone on Wall Street looks forward to because oftentimes it comprises of 50% or more of your paycheck. In a recent management committee meeting, David Solomon, CEO of Goldman Sachs, actually told executives to brace for a steep drop in bonuses, a possible recession, and continued slowdown in banking activity lasting through the second half of 2023. Cutting bonuses is a key way for banks to rein in costs aside from laying off employees, especially because bonus compensation is one of Wall Street's biggest expenses. Barclays' banking revenues were down nearly 50% last year, and they've said that they plan to cut bonuses by 30% for their investment bankers this year. Credit Suisse announced that they're going to pay their junior and mid-level banker bonuses in installments, sort of like an IOU. So according to people who are familiar with the matter, each of these 3 installments will be paid in about 40 days after April 1st, July 1st, and October 1st. Furthermore, Deutsche Bank is slashing their bonus pool for investment bankers by 40%, which is one of the most severe cuts in the industry. So with all this said, what happens if you do get laid off or you're worried that you might be on the chopping block? Well, firstly, it's good to note that the market is truly never dead on Wall Street. There's still hiring going on, but right now it's an employer's market. Lesser known banks have the opportunity to pick up talent where they might not have had the chance otherwise. And beyond that, there are still large banks who are hiring. For example, JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon recently said that his bank is still in hiring mode. And whether you just lost your job or you're worried that you might be, here are some tips for how you can deal with it. Firstly, my recommendation is to get back in as soon as you can. It might sound good to take some time off, and you should, but you shouldn't be taking so much time off where you no longer have your foot in the industry. Despite all the layoffs happening, it still is possible to get a job in high finance, especially if you equip yourself well. One way to do so is stay on top of the market news, and I would recommend a financial newsletter like Market Hedwig. They're a free weekly financial newsletter that summarizes the views of major Wall Street banks, and you can subscribe to it using the link in my description box below, especially if you don't want to miss a beat in the financial markets. For those who have already been thinking about it, go back to school. You consider going back for a second degree, getting your MBA. This could be your chance to do so, especially if you feel like there aren't a ton of really viable options for you out in the job market right now. That concludes the end of this video. I hope you guys found it helpful. Please remember to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!